Alright, so today I've got this snap-on ratcheting wrench that I bought at a yard sale, and it's not in the best condition. It's not badly rusted or anything, but it's rather pitted. It's clearly seen some time outside of a temperature-controlled shop. The on and off lever is fairly seized. It doesn't quite feel right. It's not clicking over like it should, and the ratcheting pawl doesn't feel quite right. This may just be due to it being a relatively old design, but it doesn't have a real detented click. It's kind of just slipping the whole time. It does stop on the reverse, so that's good. So first up, I'm going to clean out the head screws so that I can actually make sure that my screwdriver makes a good contact here. I don't want to have too much gunk inside these screws. Otherwise, we risk having additional cam out when we actually apply torque, which is a quick way to have a non-starter with any sort of tool repair. That's coming out pretty nicely. No stripping, no camming. Feels good. Ooh, look at that. That's not looking good. Fairly heavy rust corrosion on that. But it's not seized, it's not locked up, it is behaving. Feels like it's coming out fairly cleanly. It's very gooed up. They may not necessarily be rust, it might just be old packing grease. The front comes off quite cleanly there, nice. Alright. Here we've got the front panel here. It's a little bit of corrosion, a little bit of just plain old goo. And the ratchet, the teeth all look good. None of them look particularly chipped or worn. Very great shape, considering the date on this that's listed is 1959. And the fact that I bought it from a secondhand farm, I'd have expected much worse from that sort of condition. So let's see if we can figure out why the on-off is not rotating as expected. Alright, looks like there's a ball bearing in there that's not wanting to go back into its detent. Alright, what should we do here? I think we'll go ahead and give that a clean and see if it resolves itself. And if it doesn't, then we'll have to take some more aggressive maneuvers to it. I can get it to go back in pretty well with the pick. Still doesn't want to go. Alright, well, we'll see how that looks after a quick rinse off. Got a pan of warm water here. And I'll put down a towel to receive my rinsed parts. Okay. This is scrubbing off quite nicely. Doesn't look like the shaft has any real corrosion. Mostly just a little bit of goo. This will probably look even better after I get stiffer bristles on it. But for the first start, we'll go with a soft toothbrush just to get the real light stuff off. Yeah, it's definitely got a layer of old grease on it. This has an excellent feel to the surface, very smooth, very clean. Despite the age of it, it doesn't feel like it's been worn particularly badly. Look how smooth that finish is. It's very clean for the age. So I'm going to go ahead and assume that this was made out of fairly hard steel. Even though the body of it looks to be cast, the movement seems pretty well built. That looks like it's milled to me, not cast. So the actual internals are very robust, while the body of it is a little bit less so, but not in a bad way. It's exactly what it needs. You don't need a milled shaft for this thing. The simple cast body is perfectly sufficient. The worst looking bit of it is the on-off lever here. You can see that it's very pitted, and the brass pin of it is quite visible. I don't believe that would have been originally visible. I believe that would have been under the head of this, but I could be wrong. It's still feeling pretty stiff here. Not that I've expected a little bit of warm water to do any sort of miracles to it. But you can see I'm getting a decent amount of grease off the inside. I'm sure people are thinking, warm water, why would you even bother? What would that do? But it's mostly just a quick pass to get easy grime and grease off first before I bring it into something a little heftier, because I don't want to choke out my magical evapor rust with too much grime that I could have easily taken off with a little bit of agitation and some warm water. And you can see this toothbrush has gone from white to deep brown, so it's clearly doing something. These cheap dollar store toothbrushes are perfect for this sort of thing because they're dirt cheap, they're fairly stiff, they feel nice, but it does what I need for the job. So let's see, this is swinging easily enough, but it still doesn't want to pop over that ball bearing. Let's see if the pick is any different now. Oh, it wants to go in, but it just can't quite clear that bump. So let's see. It's just doesn't quite make it there. Alright, well, let's put it in the evapor rust and let it sit for a little bit and see if that makes any difference. So we'll bring up the larger soak tray. Go ahead and place my parts in. With the more needy sides upwards as much as possible. Not quite enough left in this bottle to cover it totally, so I'll have to do a quick little flip. Have to be careful leaving parts not fully submerged in evapor rust. It likes to leave a nice little etch line at the level of the fluid. So you have to be a little bit cautious with it, just to be safe. But I'll let that sit for a few minutes and be right back. Alright, I gave these a little time to soak, so now I've come back, and let's see what happens when I give them a little bit of scrub. So with the brass bristles, I think I can get off a lot of this corrosion. Let's see. Looks like it doesn't want to budge too much, but it is a little brighter. But I don't want to take too much of it off because I love the way it gives a little bit of character with that. So I'll leave some of it. And we'll probably give this a rinse in the warm water to wash off all of the rusted goo that we get from using a chelating compound like evapor rust, yeah. Almost tried to call it Rusties. This is not cars. But the mechanism still is fairly seized, so I might have to go at this pawl with a pin punch and take it off. I didn't really want to punch this because I'm worried that if I take the punch to it, I won't get it back together. And that would be a little bit tragic, wouldn't it? So that's kind of my last resort, but it doesn't look like we're getting much traction there in terms of getting this to fall over. But it does feel like it's gone a little bit further every time. Oh, there we go. It's over and back. Hey, looks like we have some movement. It's not the cleanest, but it is popping. All right. I won't have to pin punch the pawl out after all. Excellent. As I was saying, if you look at the pawl on both sides, you can see how that's a deformed oval here, which to me says that that was put through as a square on this side, put here, and then rounded down and flattened. So if I were to punch this out, it would have some consequences for the internal shape of that pawl. It's not designed to be removed in such a fashion. So naturally, I don't want to do that, but I don't have to. Excellent. I'm going to put this back in for a little more soak. See if I can't do something about that top coat. But these are probably just about done, seeing as they had full immersion and a good 20 minutes to soak. Evapo-rust can take an hour. They say don't leave it more than 24 hours. I find that usually 15 to 30 minutes in a warm room is sufficient to take everything off except for real thick layers of heavy corrosion. And as long as you've taken the oils off in a preliminary sort of bath, it usually cleans up pretty well. Let's go ahead and dry that off and give it a quick dip to make sure that it doesn't flash rust on me and turn back into a corroded mess, which I've had happen. It's tragic. Always make sure that you give it a little dip just so that it stays coated in something that isn't water. You don't want to leave it with a coating of anything that can flash rust on you and then immediately turn to square one and end up going through the same process all over again, removing little thin layers of your base material every time until you have a poorly fitting piece of equipment. But coming along nicely. Those are nice and bright. And expect the same from this. The ratchet itself may need a little longer, seeing as I just turned it over and it wasn't quite fully seated. It was just the square drive that was out of the water in the top of the ratchet, but it should be good enough. I'm not looking to make this look like a bright new piece of hardware. It just has to look cleaner than it did before, and most especially functional. Having the non-functioning on-off lever is a bit of a deal breaker for using that tool for anything whatsoever. You can see a huge difference here in these two pieces. This one is quite bright, while this one is much more corroded. This one here has a layer on top of it. It doesn't come off. It may just be old. That's really caked on there. Let's see if we can't get some of that out of this threads. This is very stubborn material. It looks like a combination of ancient grease and good old-fashioned dirt, which is always fun to get out of tools. Because those old packing greases they used in old stuff, once it dries out, it just becomes this gum that you can't do much to. But I don't have to have this perfect. Should be good enough. I would like that a little cleaner, but I'll live. It's just a screw. Worst case, I can replace it. It should be not too exotic of a piece to replace, but naturally I'd like to keep everything original if I can. The nice thing about brass bristles is they're softer than most of the materials I'm using them on, so you don't see any sort of degradation of the surface characteristics. It stays nice and fresh, and takes off all the softer caked on rust layers after the evapor-rust has loosened them, and any of the less desirable greases, dirts, just general gunk. Nice soft bristles. Soft on the material. Not so soft on my fingers, but on the material itself, excellently soft. Quick roll through that. Alright, let's pull this out again. Still clicking over, good. Oh, it sounds real gritty. I don't like that. It is definitely getting some of this pitting cleaned out, which is quite nice. Yeah, there we go. Starting to see some real improvement here. Yeah. This cast material tends to pit in strange ways, especially the older casts. You end up with a really nice surface finish, which, well, I'm sure is not entirely intended. Gives this grippy feel to it that I absolutely love in old tools. You can see the difference on this side versus this side. It's a small improvement, but a little bit. It's mostly just getting that surface layer cleaned up, and then it's fine if there's a little bit left in the down low. I'm not overly worried about that. Just get this cleaned up and ready to go in the toolbox. Love having old vintage tools around. They just give such a gravity to the situation. And even if newer tools are a little fancier, it's sometimes nice to have old stuff. Because the nice thing about old tools is that they've stood the test of time, because the bad old tools have rusted away to nothing. The decent old tools are the only ones left behind. So it's an interesting case of survivorship bias that works out in my favor. So when I buy old tools, generally speaking, they're going to have been the good ones, because the bad ones have been destroyed, thrown away, or otherwise lost. And the best place to get these sort of old tools are estate sales. You can get really good bargains. Like this wrench was about $5. It's not the cheapest wrench I've bought, but it's not a bad price for something this old of a snap-on grade quality. And I like to think that whoever I'm buying this tool from their estate from would be happy to know that it's gone to someone who's going to fix it up and use it, and not just throw it away or leave it to rust in a bucket somewhere. So, I mean, it's sad that people can no longer use their own tools, but at least they're going to someone who'll carry that on for them. And I like to think that I can be that someone as much as possible. So we've got all of the surface off of this. I think I need to. Let's give it a quick wipe down. Tricky bit is getting all the water out of the inside of the pocket. This is pretty important. We don't want corrosion building up in there. It's a very critical region, but it's practically impossible to really get inside that pawl area. The best option would probably be to bake this part for a bit just to soak it out, but I think it'll be okay if I don't. I've gotten most of the moisture out. I think I'll go over the surface of this with a steel brush. A little more aggression there. It's not a problem if I take a little extra material off. Make sure to keep my workspace from getting too messy and moist. Always keep a roll of towels handy just so I can put things down on them. Keeps it nice and clean. All right, here's my ratchet. Got my steel brush. I don't use this one nearly as much. I usually stick to the brass. This is quite hard. Steel bristles aren't scratching it too much. It's very good. It's got such a nice feel to it. Old cast materials. Just sticks in the hand. It's very nice, very pleasant. Not too much on the bristles. Looks good to me. Shined up. Got that nice sort of old tool patina that I'm very fond of. So go ahead and put that there. And I think we'll go ahead and pack and reassemble, and then we'll do the exterior finish. So that's still clicking over quite nicely. Excellent. It's the main problem solved there. So we'll start off with a thick pack on the inside of Super Lube. See if I can't get that crushed down in there quite nice. I'm gonna have to smear it around in there as much as I can, action it a bit, and then repeat. That'll get a nice level in there if I can help it. Super Lube will keep things moving cleanly and also help to keep corrosion down by displacing moisture. Pack a thick layer in there. Since it's a Paul, there's no real worry about it moving out, so a thicker synthetic silicone grease will do a nice work. I'm a real big fan of Super Lube. I feel like it does a good job of lubricating most situations, and especially things like this where it's not a high-speed item. The thicker grease is fine. As Super Lube is drawing out some of the old grease there, you can see the brown coming in, but that's not too bad. It's still clicking over. It's clicking over all right. Looks good. We'll go ahead and pack it a little more. I'm not too worried about having too much grease in there. That's much better than the opposite of having not enough. And Super Lube is very stable over long term as well, so I don't have to worry about it really going sour on me. I'll go ahead and put this in. And I'm really only just sort of coating the whole surface in order to add that corrosion resistance. I know putting grease on the bearing surface doesn't really do much. Oh, not the bearing surface, but the engagement surface on these gears. Sure, it'll just be displaced as soon as it goes around, but getting that thin layer on there first will help keep the water off and hopefully prolong the life of the connection. All right. Go ahead and pack it in a little more. We'll clean off the extra once we've got it fully packed. This wrench has an interesting socket engagement system. Instead of the more common style that you see in modern wrenches where it has a captive ball bearing on the square drive, this actually has a peg on that. And I'm a little concerned about putting this on modern sockets. I'm concerned that it will bite in too hard and it will be very difficult or even impossible to get the drive to disengage without having to break something. And I'll have to look and take it slow and be real careful. I have some of the original sockets that would have gone along with this piece of hardware. And they have a specific little hole near the connection point where you can see that you could have put a pin punch or something to push the socket drive back out to ensure that it would disengage. And that's not present on newer systems, so we'll have to see carefully if it works. And you can see there, little slug of goo that's come out. That's fine. It doesn't hurt anybody. Clean off the square drive. Oh, that feels wonderful. Such a smooth click. Just purrs over. Flips over. Excellent. That feels good. That feels real good. It's got a great sound, great detents. Flips back and forth cleanly. A little bit of grease smelt in there, but that should work out after a bit of use. Probably come back after a while using this and repack it just to clean out whatever's gone in there. So we've gotten the internals fixed up. Now let's go ahead and do the externals. To do the externals, we've got this Johnson's paste wax. Rather fond of it for doing the outsides of tools. It's got an excellent smell. It reminds me of bowling alleys. And it's got a very effective layer of resistance that'll keep the outside of this tool clean for a long time, as long as I don't get it wet or otherwise soak it in materials that would remove the paste wax, obviously. So as long as the wax stays put, the tool will be protected from corrosion. And also, it'll smell nice, and it'll, well, if I were to roll bowling wool down it, it'd probably be pretty slick, but that's not on my list of things to do. Go ahead and let that sit for a minute. Pack up my excesses. All right. As you can see, usually after a couple of uses, these are garbage, so they just get chucked. 2 for $1. I'm not crying over that. Don't like the waste, but cost can't be beat. Let's go ahead and take the paste wax down. Paying attention to the corners, don't want to leave a buildup of wax there. Alright, so you want to use a wood paste wax, a furniture polishing wax, rather than an automotive wax, since the automotive wax tend to contain silicone, which, you know, I'm using silicone grease, so it's not much of an improvement, but they tend to mess with wood finishes, which is not as much of a big deal for a ratchet. I mean, I'm not using this to do anything that's going to finish wood, but it will soak into any surface it's sitting onto, and it can leave some marks. But for most cases, it's good enough. So, here we go. Polished up old tool. It's gone from something that didn't really work in one direction and couldn't be switched to the other, It's something that works in both directions. Surface finish is a little bit better, even though it's not perfect. And smells nice now. So, quick little tool restoration. Easy job. Took a $5 salvage piece and made it into something that I'll be putting to work. Quick little bonus clip here. Here's one of the sockets that came along with it. You can see this is also a snap-on 1/2-inch drive, and this one I think is a 3/4. Yeah, 3/4 socket. You can see it's got a hole right here, and when I go to put it on, push down on that little thing, it snaps in very cleanly, and this stays put quite well. But to remove it, I can't really just pull it out. It doesn't want to come out, so I have to put something in there that will depress the peg and allow it to come off. If I can do this with, there we go. So I'm worried about using this with modern tooling. We'll see.